Welcome to Municipal Focus. My name is Kevin Tocci, and I will be your host for the next 30 minutes. This particular program that we do, Municipal Focus, is different from some of the other programs that we do. We strictly focus on a municipality, its inner workings, and some of the things that are ongoing in one of the two communities that we serve, whether it's Whitman or Hanson. Just a little bit of a precursor to our conversation, as many folks may or may not know, is that we're getting ready for budget season as we get to the end of 2019, going into 2020. This is kind of a key point, knowing that in just a mere 3 to 4 weeks, we will have the governor's budget, and a lot of communities will start doing the process. Today, we are joined by Whitman Selectman, and he's also the chairman of Whitman's Budget Override Evaluation Committee, fondly known as BOEC. We're going to talk a little bit about the BOEC group, some of what they're working on, and other things when it comes to the finances of the town. Sir, welcome to Municipal Focus.
Thanks for having me again, Kevin.
You got it. I guess we're closing in on the 6th-month anniversary of the formation of the Budget Override Evaluation Committee, or BOEC, as I teased it. Where do things currently stand with your group?
We have accomplished quite a bit. Still a lot of work to be done, but I'm very happy, pleased where we are at this point.
If you would kind of tell folks, what was the mission statement of this budget committee itself?
The long and the short of it was exactly what's in the committee's name: to do a comprehensive evaluation of the town's finances and see ultimately if the town is going to need an override at some point.
So during the early process, it was decided that it was best to bring in a consultant, somebody who could be an outside set of eyes to look at the town's finances. I believe you brought in a gentleman, John Madden, who has 30 plus years of financial experience. If you could, what revelations was he able to share with the committee?
I think he was able to put a lot of things together, a lot of things that had been talked about in various venues and various committees, and really narrow it down into a single report that came from a third-party source that has really no vested interest, doesn't have much skin in the game, and provided us with a lot of quality information.
Has his findings been well received, whether it's by elected officials or even residents?
Well, if you looked at social media, I don't think his findings were received fantastically by some of the residents. But when he gave his report, it was a broad blanket statement of where we sit. Basically, he determined, after looking at revenues, forecasting, growth numbers, talking to department heads, that Whitman in the next year, possibly pushed out to 2021 fiscal year, is going to need an override of somewhere between $1 million or $5 million. On the $5 million end, it is a status quo situation where I think currently we really are spending a little more than we're taking in. I think that was clear in his findings. Not due to overspending, but due to a lot of things that are really out of the town's control. So we're in a spot where I think a lot of people heard $5 million and kind of panicked. And actually, when he said it in the public meeting, I actually...
You winced? Did you wince a little bit?
I winced and made a remark that I think a lot of people just started calling their realtors. But I would say to the people out there, let's not jump to any conclusions that He also provided a lot of different pathways that the town can look to do things differently, increase revenue sources within our operating budget, and a few other things, which goes back to your original question, that may not be perceived in the greatest way by some of the department heads and some people, because it does involve doing things differently. And I think that one of the things I took out of this committee was, yes, we know we do need an override, but we also know we need to make some changes with the way we're operating.
I know that earlier this year there were a lot of folks who critiqued the community, the elected officials, and we're critiquing the fact that why were there not enough meetings and conversations going on prior to the spring? How do you feel now? Here we are, we're getting ready to turn the corner to a new year. Do you feel that the town at this point is armed with enough information prior to the governor's budget coming out that at least you can make some good sound decisions come next May?
Well, I definitely express that frustration. And going into this year, we are light years ahead of where we were last year. A lot of quality work has been done. We've had a survey, which Dr. Tarsi from Bridgewater State did for us. Got some incredible information from that. The Override Committee has done some fantastic work. But all in all, our department heads and superintendent and the assistant superintendent have really gotten on board. And I believe the school is going to present the budget Wednesday night. Our department heads have, all presented budgets. We're way ahead, and I am happy where we are right now.
Now, I know that recently there was a passage of an education bill by the state, $1.5 billion. This is going to be over 7 years. But my understanding is that a lot of the monies may be geared towards gateway cities and communities that are struggling. Where does the Whitman Hanson School District have you got any information as to if any of that funding is going to trickle down to these two communities, Whitman and Hanson, or is it a matter of a wait and see type of a thing? Do you have any information in that area?
I don't think anyone has any definitive answers what that piece of legislation is actually going to do for Whitman and Hanson. What I have heard is that we probably will see some more funding in transportation, McKinney-Vento, and maybe a increase of somewhere between $25 and $30 a student, possibly. The problem is a lot of people know that the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District right now with state aid is in a hold harmless situation, which is basically limiting our state aid growth to, I think, slightly more than 0.5% a year. So it's when you're only getting 0.5% on a budget that is basically, I think, 48%, covered by state aid, it does cause some waves with the town.
You mentioned in regards to Mr. Madden finding that maybe that the town is spending spending more than it's taking in, and knowing that a part of that pie also has to deal with education, knowing that a great piece of the monies that the municipality brings in and has to dedicate annually does go to education. Where's the conversation been with your committee when it comes to the method? Because I know that that's something that's kind of a touchy situation. It's a touchy subject when you're looking at statutory versus per pupil when it comes to the annual school assessment.
It really isn't an issue that we've gone out and gotten a lot of, within the Budget Override Evaluation Committee, that we've gotten opinions on. I didn't think that it was an issue that we needed to tackle in that committee. I do believe that a lot of people are on board that to provide the most equitable source to be the most equitable for our taxpayers and our students, and to preserve their local aid, because that's what essentially the statutory method does. It's a preservation of local aid that's supposed to go to the town of Whitman. I think we're all on the same page.
Okay. What I would ask you, because I know that the early conversations is that folks from the neighboring community of Whitman, that shares the school district, there was a small group of people who felt as though that there was something that town officials in Whitman were trying to pull off at the expense of Hanson residents. And again, I know it was part of a conversation that some folks who were very critical as to Whitman's findings. What were your thoughts when you heard or you've seen folks who have felt as though that there was some kind of, fix in to try to help Whitman's residents and the taxpayers and the financial situation at the expense of a neighbor?
At the end of the day, I'm a Whitman Selectman, and my job is to do the best job I can for the taxpayers of Whitman, and the taxpayers and our kids. And that's what I feel that bringing this issue to light is doing. But I think a lot of the concern and people kind of getting frustrated with this was the lack of knowledge behind it. I think with the school committee having Ms. Christine Lynch come in and really thoroughly go through this thing, solid explanation. I had hoped that was done right off the bat. It kind of lingered a little bit, I guess, scheduling-wise, led to some confusion. But I think the towns now, both towns, understand it and understand why we're doing it.
And for folks who don't know, who is Miss Lynch? Is she someone that the schools brought in as a consultant?
No, Christine Lynch is an employee of Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. She basically is the assessment guru. Has been there for a long time and the most knowledgeable person on the issue.
Very nice. And now, so it's interesting enough is I believe that you had a collective of Whitman and Hanson and school officials recently get together and have a conversation. Did you have a chance to either be in the room or have a seat at the table and be a part of that conversation? And if so, I'm kind of asking you multiple parts here. If so, what was that conversation like?
I was there. I was very happy to be there. It was myself from the Whitman contingent, was myself, Dr. Kowalski, and Town Administrator Mr. Lynham. The Whitman school committee member was Chris Scriven. It was a very solid conversation. I think a lot was discussed. A lot of things were put right on the table and ready to be dealt with.
If you could kind of give a couple of examples as to like what was some of that, what was some of the main focus? Was it basically the assessment as to how the funding should go? I'm sure Whitman officials had a chance to express their thoughts, and there was a counter by Hanson officials.
Well, what I would say, one of the main points of the evening that came out was both towns were in agreement that the school committee has a job to do. The school committee knows that they now have two methods to choose from, two legal methods, statutory alternative, and they need to set a budget. the towns were very clear and gelled on that opinion that they need to go do their work. I don't think anybody wanted to see an assessment issue hold that up. That being said, on the assessment issue, there were some disagreements.
Well, when you're talking about something of this nature, I think it's natural to have disagreements as long as there's a constructive conversation that's going on. Would you say that it was, while there were disagreements, there was still constructive conversation that was happening?
Very constructive conversation. I will say I have the utmost respect for Laura Kemet and Jim Hickey, who were the two Hanson selectmen there. They're in I understand they're in a tough position. But I think as from the Whitman side of things, this is something that we need to pursue for our town and the future of our students.
So what happens? So what I'm taking from what you're saying here is that school officials, the school committee, will be the ones who will not only put forth what the assessment's going to be, but they're going to do it in such a manner. They're going to say how it's being delivered, whether it's going to be per pupil or statutory. Are they going to have to take a vote prior to that, and so the towns can prepare accordingly?
Yes. So the way the assessment can be done, for those who might not know about it, is that there's actually two methodologies.
Yep.
One is the per pupil as discussed, and the other is the statutory method, which basically is a makeup of various figures and demographic issues that the state provides you a number. So the school committee can choose and vote on either one of those assessments. So they have to do that, then they'll present their budget, and the towns will get it. So from that point, I would hope that's done sooner than later, so it gives both towns a chance to figure things out. What happens beyond that is entirely up to town meetings, possibly a super town meeting, and possibly the state.
Do you think it could possibly come down to that? I mean, is it a matter of what decision is made by the school committee and how each town perceives it?
Well, it really is. It's going to be how the school committee votes it will be how it affects each town. I think if the school committee would vote statutory, you are not going to see an issue in Whitman, and that our business will be probably pretty smooth. In Hanson, they may hit a bumpy road, and vice versa if the school committee should choose the alternative method.
Now, is this something that the school committee is going to vote once and for all, or are they going to vote annually? Do we know how that's going to take place?
Well, if they were to use the alternative method, that needs to be an annual vote.
Okay.
It must be expressed to the towns that the towns must be given notice that they have chosen an alternative method, and that needs to be voted on annually and also approved by DESE. Statutory, I believe, is a straight 2/3 vote.
So is it almost like when each year school committees vote about school choice? Is it something similar like that, where they have to decide whether they want it to be a school choice community?
Well, what we've really figured out during this whole process is this is something that should be recommended to be discussed annually. Under the current agreement we have, we haven't seen that happen. And again, I don't blame anyone. At the end of the day, there's a lot of people, very committed people volunteering. You may fall between cycles of information the state's putting out. So I can't blame anyone, but what we know now is this should be a topic of discussion every year.
Depending on what ends up happening for this upcoming, for the 2021 school, the budget, will this play a role as to the amount or whether the town of Whitman will go for an override?
Well, as far as budgets, and that was, I guess, one of the probably confusing things to maybe the people watching the Override Evaluation Committee meeting was Mr. Madden's report is based on a 5-year average, 5-year trends. We have seen some growth due to an override for the fire department, which kind of bumped things up. We have seen what amounts to be very high assessments for the school, needed assessments, and I'm not knocking that. But what we've learned through this committee is that we cannot exceed our new growth. And, you know, one of the things he did commend us for the work that he saw us do to keep things afloat. We've used some unorthodox funding choices the last couple of years, but we really have been able to do our best to not interrupt services that the taxpayers expect.
Digressing back to that meeting between the gathering of the minds for the two towns, do you suspect that there'll be another such meeting, or was that one of a kind?
That meeting was one of a kind. I think another thing that came out of that meeting was the selectmen feel that we've, you know, the school committee knows the road that they need to go down, and this really needs to be at the end of the day, it's the taxpayers that are, you know, ultimately writing this check, and I think the towns need to really work together on a smaller scale to see if there is anything we could do to work together.
How about a common ground in regards to the school assessments? Do you think there'll ever be a common ground between Whitman and Hanson, whether it's statutory or per pupil is going to be something that can be mixed in from time to time?
Well, I'll give you my own opinion here that I firmly believe the statutory method is the most equitable way to go. It may not seem like that on the Hanson end right now, but it self-corrects. It self-corrects for a lot of different reasons. If you chart this back, you've seen that. You've seen, I think if you chart it back to about 2006 or 7, you actually see this favor Hanson. So I'm very leery of working out an agreement. If the boards as they sit now were able to work out an agreement, it's still considered an alternative method. And statutory is still in play year after that if we should go into a new regional agreement. My concern is whether it be this year or a couple of years down the road, you now have a changeover in boards and we're back to this again.
Sure.
I think for me, and I can only speak for myself at this time on this, although I do understand it's a hard pill for Hanson to swallow, long term, it's the best solution for our kids.
What lies ahead, should I say, for the Budget Override Evaluation Committee? What lies ahead?
You know, recently I've done quite a bit of thinking on this because we really have knocked off a large piece of what this committee was set up for. I think I don't see this committee getting into actually giving a number. I do think we have a lot more research to do, but ultimately I would like to see maybe this committee dissolves, gets renamed, but we do need to work on, and this is something that's been kicked around quite a bit, is a strategic plan. Going into this, one of my main focuses was sustainability. Mm-hmm. That if we were going to try for an override, it needed to be all the questions answered, mm-hmm. and it needed to be sustainable.
Correct.
As the committee sits right now, we do have a margin to work within of what we know the override will need to be, but the sustainability piece is beyond that. There's also issues on the horizon. The MSBA recently fast-tracked Whitman
New middle school?
for the new middle school. We found out that they had contacted the superintendent and that we were fast-tracked a couple days before Thanksgiving. So that piece, depending on how the voters perceive that issue, comes into play as far as asking for more money. And then the DPW building, that problem has not been resolved. So that's, and we're still quite a ways away from having exact numbers on those pieces. I personally am leery of, you can't keep going back to the voters and asking for more and more. I joke around and I say, this can't play out like a Doritos commercial. It's not crunch all you want, we'll make more. So we do need to, if we're gonna do it, we gotta do it right. We gotta have a plan, and it has to be sustainable. This committee as it sits is still a little ways away from that.
And just to remind folks, if folks want to, they can catch it, the rebroadcasts of the not only live meetings, but also the rebroadcasts. When does BOEC meet, and what time and where?
Well, we typically meet on Mondays. The schedule varies depending on what we have to get done. Currently, we're in a little bit of a lull. I was thinking about trying to get another meeting for next week, but we're at that point where we're waiting for all budgets to come in. Mm-hmm. I would like to, and obviously one of the biggest one, the biggest one is the school budget, mm-hmm. which we still don't have. Tentatively, I would like to try and do it next week. I don't know. If not, it'll be right after Christmas, and I'll try to get it in before New Year's, so right after.
Let's have you back in here, whether it's a part of this program or one of our other WHCA signature programs to provide an update, as we will probably kickstart the By the Numbers programs, knowing that 'tis the season to do so. And I want to thank you.
Thanks, Kevin,
for coming in and kind of giving a breakdown as to where things stand. And I want to thank you, the viewer, for tuning in and asking for programs like this to be better informed. That's what we do, and your elected officials are more than happy. Anytime we've asked anybody, they've been more than happy to come in and be able to give you all the information, not fake news, but all the information that you need. So when it comes time to make decisions, whether it's for elections, whether it's for town meeting, to make financial decisions, you are better informed. If you have any comments or questions or any guests that you'd like to see, info@whca.tv. And then whatever you do, put in the subject line of the particular show or the comment that you have. And until the next time, you've been watching Municipal Focus. Have a good day.